Well, I think the most important thing to know about me and my upbringing and my childhood, which has brought me to do the work that I'm doing now, is that I am a first generation immigrant. I came to the United States with my parents when I was a year and a half old. And my folks, like so many people of that time, and for the history of the entire nation, came to this country in search of this notion of the American dream. And so the fact, I think, of my being a first generation immigrant, why that's relevant is that, like many people, the main thing in life was to work really hard. And there wasn't really a culture or a language about talking about one's emotions. We really didn't talk about our emotions when I was growing up. If there was some difficulty or a challenge, the main response was put your head down and work harder. There's that famous John Adams quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it here, where he says something like, I study war and politics so that my children can study philosophy and art, something to that effect. And I think that the sacrifices and hard work of my parents and that immigrant ethic gave me the freedom to be able to study what I've studied and have the opportunities that I've had. At the same time, part of my cultural inheritance was not having a language for talking about emotions or really how to work with emotions. Emotions were simultaneously considered something that wasn't talked about, but also were at the same time extremely present, but not talked about. So I think maybe that's something that others experience in their own lives, regardless of whether they're immigrants. So as I grew older and I had these opportunities to study economics and sociology and social psychology and philosophy and spirituality and neuroscience and biology and all the things that I got to study because my parents brought me here, introduced me to this possibility that there's actually a way of relating to one's emotions that can be a deeper source of energy, inspiration, creativity, constructive power to make a better world. And frankly, that wasn't something that I even knew was possible until I was well into adulthood, until I was already in the world and gotten my education and working as a professional. And of course, it wasn't at all because my folks didn't want me to have that. It was just simply that they themselves did not have that in their world growing up. My dad in particular came from a really difficult poverty-stricken childhood, to be frank. And it was all about survival. There was no talking about emotions. And, so he carried that with him. And so it wasn't that he didn't want to give that to me. It just wasn't there for him, right? So here we are now with this opportunity to develop a different kind of relationship to our emotions. And I myself now am a mom. So I particularly have a feeling of urgency or a sense of inspiration for myself, first and foremost, to practice this, but also to find ways of making it part of our culture so that it's not something unusual in the world that my child will grow up in.